Hi everyone, welcome back to AP Psychology with me, Miss Baines, your teacher, where you can take advantage of being able to pause and rewind me as I deliver you our latest content. So go ahead and grab those markers, get yourself nice and comfy, and of course, don't forget those very important binder notes that go in lockstep order with this video called Unit 6, Video 6, Childhood to Adolescence, which can be found on page 7 of your binder notes in Unit 6. I'll see you on the other side. Hey, welcome back, my lovelies. For this unit, we're going to be discussing the somewhat painful, yet very exciting preteen and teen years, which is called adolescence. Adolescence starts physically with puberty, which is usually between 11 and 14 years old. And that is where the sex organs mature, and this has important implications for the way that adolescents feel about themselves because of their self-image, greatly impacted or affected by when we physically mature. Early maturing boys tend to do better in athletics and therefore become more popular, and they do better purely because they have more muscle mass and because they have gone through puberty already, and this will typically help them in the social setting. In addition to helping them in a social setting, it will help them develop a more positive self-concept. However, they do tend to get a little bit more trouble at this stage, at least in the heterosexual experience, where boys tend to start being more attracted to same-aged girls, but the girls their age are either not quite ready or a little too ready and become interested in boys that are older than their own age. Boys and girls tend to start experimenting with alcohol and substance abuse, mainly because they look older than they are, and they likely have friends who are older of the opposite sex or older siblings that they want to emulate. In the long run, however, early maturing boys are typically more responsible and cooperative later on in life, and early maturing girls are more sought after for dating for obvious reasons, and they tend to have better self-esteem than late developing girls. However, you have to be careful here, because when girls develop a little too early, this can have the opposite effect, right? It could potentially be quite embarrassing if they're developing much too soon or much sooner than the rest of their peer group or their classmates or their friends. Later developing girls and boys are also psychologically affected. Boys who develop later are often smaller and less coordinated, and therefore are seen as less attractive evolutionarily wise, which in turn affects their self-esteem and their self-concept, and girls who develop later tend to be at a disadvantage in junior high and high school. We all remember those awkward times when everything is based on appearances and we're looking all sorts of awkward, right? Braces and, greasy hair and pimples and all that stuff that nobody ever wants to go through again. If you are developing later, then you're not going to be as quite high up on that social ladder. However, later in life, because girls who develop later, they tend to be taller and well proportioned, and they often report a greater satisfaction with their bodies once they are adults because of our societal ideals and beauty standards. This can change across cultural groups, of course, but for the most part, I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. In cognitive development in adolescence, usually adolescents are in the formal operational stage, according to Jean Piaget. And this is the idea that they can begin to reason abstractly and hypothetically. They can think about the consequences of their actions, which in turn leads to better understanding of their moral principles, which leads to a new name for you today, Lawrence Kohlberg, Stages of Moral Development. We all remember Kohlberg with his chimpanzee and insight learning. He is also famously known for being a psychologist that we associate with our ethics and moral development. He believes that our moral reasoning helps to guide our behavior. And what he did was propose moral dilemmas and ask people what they would do or how they would react in a particular situation, and then those would dictate which stage they were in based on the answers that they gave. Kohlberg decided there would be 3 levels of moral development. And what he said was, it's no real age restrictions on when you go through these moral stages. You can be in one as a child and another as an adult. The only stipulation, he said, is that the last level, the third level, you had to at least be 13 years old in order to reach that level, because otherwise you weren't cognitively ready to really quite understand what they're talking about. And you'll get that once we go through all of these stages. So the first stage is the pre-conventional stage. This is usually young children. However, like I said, adults can be in this stage as well. And this stage is the idea that your moral behaviors and your actions are based on rewards and punishments. So when you're behaving a certain way, what is in it for me, right? Am I going to get in trouble? What are the consequences? Am I going to get something positive for doing this? It's not about whether it's right? You're not just doing it as a developing human being, right, for the sake of being a good person. You want to know what the reward and what the punishment is going to be and what's in it for you. And people can stay in this stage for a very long time until they really start developing that frontal lobe and can start being more interested in people outside of their own self, right? And the next stage is the conventional stage. Okay, pre-conventional, pre meaning for before, and now the conventional stages. What are the conventions of society, right? This is where you're interested in pleasing other people and doing what is right by the social laws that you are following. You're following the rules and you're considering others, and you're considering more than just yourself about the world. You're considering your own family and families outside of your families. You're considering your loved ones, but also the love of people that are on the planet. Right? You really don't want to break rules. You're kind of just doing what is right because it's what you should do. Okay? You feel good about that internally, that you're doing the right thing. Okay? And then the final stage is post-conventional. According to Kohler, you have to be at least 13 years old because you have to have gone through puberty and have the cognitive growth and ability to understand this stage. Until you're over that age, what this stage is, and you're having to use higher and abstract reasoning to guide your behavior and your thinking. Things about higher ideals like justice and basic human rights. The idea that it not be in the best interest of everybody around you to break the rules. Right? You're more sensitive to other people's feelings. It might not be a law or against the law, but you know that when you're doing it, it's because it's the right thing to do. It's what's socially acceptable in your social development, right? Because you now care about how other people view you. Not in the sense where you're going to change your behavior because you think that yourself is not good enough, but you care that you're a part of the social construct with other human beings and you're all in this together, okay? It matters to you. Okay, so social development is devised by a third psychologist named Erik Erikson, and we're going to talk about all of his levels of social development, not just the adolescent stages, but they do kind of fit well here in the stages of growth and development with your babies. So we are going to add them in and weave them in right at this point where your kids are about at that middle school age and early high school ages. Okay, so Erikson looked at psychological development with the idea that we are looking at our social selves, not only by people that are around us, but how we interact with those other people, and also our knowledge and understanding of ourselves in a deeper, more meaningful way. How do we fit in with society? He believed that each stage that we go through, we have to resolve a particular conflict or we won't get out of that stage and be ready for the next stage. And we also want to know what the negative consequences are of that stage if we don't go through each of the stages. Okay, so each stage has 2 vocab words that you'll need to know. And each of those vocab words kind of tells you what the stage is and what the level that they'll be in. Okay, so in your notes, it's set up in that way. So there's the first stage is called trust versus mistrust. And this happens 0 to 18 months. And this is just the idea that babies are just kind of figuring out, who can I trust in the world? Can I rely on my caregiver? Can he or she provide for me what it is I need? My food, my shelter, my clothing. It doesn't have to be their parents. And in the case of a child, if the child becomes attached securely, then the child develops a sense of trust and predictability with that person or with those people who are around them. If there's inconsistency in the care or lacking in the care or neglect in the care, the infant will develop a sense of mistrust or paranoia feelings. Am I going to get what I need in order to go into the next stage of autonomy? Okay? You may have heard this word autonomy before, okay? It simply just means that you're self-sufficient. Okay, so once you are out of the first stage, the next stage is called autonomy versus shame and doubt. This is about 18 months to 3 years old. This starts with the terrible twos, right? Or the terrible threes. And this is when kids are kind of deciding ideas for themselves and acting out and testing your limits and making decisions for themselves. And it is in this stage where kids really want to start choosing things and making decisions on their own. So, like, they might want to decide what glittery clothing they're going to wear, even if you're going to some conservative, very quiet church thing, right? They want to wear the red sequins bodysuit and tutu, and you're like trying to get this kid out of the house and they're screaming because they want to wear the sparkly thing, right? Okay, and this is the stage where they might want to choose like which cup they're gonna have, or which spoon, or the red cup or the blue cup or the bunny cup or the doggy cup. Okay, parents need to set boundaries here. However, they also need to let the child have some autonomy, right? Some of those autonomous decision makings, their own decisions, and their independence in making those decisions. If a child is overly restricted, meaning they're not driven, this idea of autonomy, then they're unable to assert themselves in this sense of shame, right? Is coming up for them. Right? They're given too much independence, then there are no boundaries, and the child will become very spoiled and over-demanding and a controlling child. They'll also have a sense of shame and self-consciousness. Okay, the third stage after this is initiative versus guilt. Okay, so once you've passed that controlling child stage and worked out some autonomy, it's this idea of, if I take an initiative, right, I am doing something correctly, and I take the initiative to do so, and I am capable of doing things for myself at this age, right? I might learn to tie my shoes, I might help mommy wash the dishes, right? This is age 3 to 6. This is the age where kids want to do everything by themselves. They might want to play mommy and have baby dolls and do all of the things that mommy does for them while they're doing the stuff for the baby. Okay, they want to put on their own seatbelt. They want to put on their own clothing. They want to choose their own ice cream. They want to get their milk in the right cup. These are all the things that the child really wants to do. Now, if a parent reacts positively to this, then the child feels confident and they can take these little minor risks and they start to build their self-confidence and feel good about themselves. If a parent overreacts negatively or tries to do everything and micromanage or be a helicopter mom, then the child will lack self-sufficiency. They're going to be very dependent and have low self-esteem, and they might even fear punishment for doing things on their own, which is a bad thing, right? We want to encourage a kid to be able to stand up for themselves and to do for themselves when you're not around. Okay, there's a video on this that we're going to watch, and we'll come back to these concepts. Is a really good example of a child in this stage.
Worry about yourself. Worry about yourself.
Can I help?
No. I help. I don't. You can help when we're out to eat, okay? You can help when we are out to eat.
Okay.
Do you have this sissy?
Probably. You want me to help, Rose?
No. Thank you. No, thank you.
What do you want me to do?
Worry about yourself. Worry about yourself. I'll do this one, so gonna do that. You drive! What about yourself? Go drive! Go!
Okay, the next is industry versus inferiority. Okay, so this is school age kids around 6 when kids go into school formally, not preschool, not nursery school, not daycare, but kindergarten. Okay, so around ages 5 and 6 to 11. Think about the time in the life when you were getting involved in clubs and sports and you went to do museum stuff and you were having play dates and music together and all of that stuff. And not only were you now going with your mommy and me groups, right? But you were starting to have play dates now where, maybe you were dropped off at somebody else's house and are away from your parents for the first time. Okay, so kids are capable of doing things socially, and if a child finds something that they're really good at or something that they really enjoy and have a sense of pride about, they feel good about it and want to continue doing it. If they don't find something that they're good at, then they feel inferior to their peers or not as good as the other kids. The next stage is one that you guys are all in right now, which is identity versus role confusion. This is ages 12 to 20, so mostly preteen teenagers and up to young adulthood or college aged. This is where you're going to try to figure out your identity, who you really are in this world. You're trying to discover what it is that you want to do. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are the roles that you're good at? What are the roles that you're better suited to? What are the things that you have a sense of real goodness about who you are and who you're going to be later in life, what's going to make you be a bit better human being. So think about this stage as being the time where you kind of feel pressure to identify what you want to do with your life, and you tend to individuate or separate yourself away from your parents, right? You rebel a little bit and you tend to rely more on your friends or your peer group than you do on your older siblings or your parents. It's really a time when you are developing personal relationships and deciding what it is in your true self and what role you're going to play in these relationships that you have with other people. Okay, the next stage after this is from college age, about 21 to 30. This is intimacy versus isolation. So what you are doing in this stage, most people are finding a life partner or getting married or having a partnership that might not be marriage, because there's all sorts of ways to be in relationships now that are acceptable, but you are ready to love and to be loved, and you're developing more intimate relationships and senses of connectedness with other human beings. And if you don't find this, then you tend to draw yourself inward and avoid any close emotional contact with other people. Okay, and it's if you don't have a close sort of relationship with somebody in an intimate way by this time in your life, you end up having, as an adult, all sorts of bad relationships and hardships with relating to either the opposite sex or somebody you're attracted to, and you have commitment issues or you have codependency issues and things like that. The next stage is generativity versus stagnation. This was a hard one to remember because you may not have ever heard these words, but what I want you to remember is the root of the first word, generativity. Okay, generate, right? To generate, to produce something, right? So I am producing something and I am giving back to the world, and you feel like you are making a difference by either having children or having a career and children, getting your career in order and finding a good job, being involved with your community, some religious group that you are taking more seriously now that you're an adult. You feel a sense of accomplishment. And if you don't feel stagnant, right? Stagnant means staying in one place, like stagnant water. Then you feel a sense of worth. If you feel stagnant and you can't move forward, you feel a sense of worthlessness and you are preoccupied with yourself. You might want to try and change that and maybe you're going through a midlife crisis to try to undo some of the stages that you didn't go through properly and go through them with the help of a therapist, right? This is what psychology is all about. And this midlife crisis for you tends to be like, hey, you know, I really need to fix what's going on here, and I want all the things that I said I didn't want, and just because I couldn't find them with certain people doesn't mean that they're not right for me. Okay, our final stage is integrity versus despair. This is when you're looking back and reflecting on life. So about 65 years old. This is the stage where you look back and you ask yourself, was I a good person? Did I live a life that was worth living? Have I done enough? Have I made a difference in this world? And if you feel like you have, then you'll look back and reflect on your life happily, and you'll have a strong sense of self and acceptance of where your life went and how it played out. This is where the next stages in your life are going to be, however, if you feel like you haven't done enough, then you're going to feel a sense of despair or a sense of regret or disappointment about your life. And then finally, here is a short video that you can watch and go back and see each of the stages.